Welcome to this breakaway crochet tutorial. In this video, I'm going to show you how to use my breakaway crochet techniques to work this Noughts and Hearts Doily. The free written pattern for this project is available for download in my Ravelry pattern store. And in this video, I will focus on specific concepts that might be hard to understand by reading the pattern alone. So let's have a closer look at what we will be making. This doily is worked from the center out, and it starts with a Heartstrings Granny Square, which you may already be familiar with from other projects. The little hearts and knots motifs are worked continuously using my breakaway crochet techniques, so there's a specific sequence to follow, which I will review with you shortly. The second section consists of 5 rounds of double crochet, worked just like you would for a solid granny square, but it has this simple lace insertion that comes halfway along. Then the Noughts and Hearts motifs make a comeback in the third section, or the border. These are actually worked back and forth in rows, and just like the central square, there is a specific sequence to follow. Okay, so let's get started with our Heartstrings Granny Square, which is section 1 right in the middle. And if you have done other projects that involve this Heartstrings Granny Square, or even the Granny Square on its own, you might be used to starting with one of the stitches on either bump of the heart here. In our case, we're going to start with the corner knot, and right in the corner of the corner knot here. It's kind of the beauty of this square. You can start at any stitch on the perimeter. But for now, we're going to start with this little knot here. We're going to work a floating single crochet and the first 5 stitches. So let's break that down so you really know what I'm talking about. So to start that first knot, we start with a floating single crochet. To do a floating single crochet, we go straight into making a floating ring. That is, do a yarn over, pinch the yarn underneath the hook, do another yarn over, and draw that new thread in with what you're already pinching. So now we've got 2 pinched loops, yarn over, pull through 2, and these 2 loops together are the floating ring. They replace the chain 4 slip stitch or magic circle that you might be using in other projects, and this is where we're going to be working all our stitches for the knot into. Okay, so since this is a floating single crochet, let's do the single crochet part. We use the 2 loops that are already on the hook to do that. All we need to do is yarn over, pull through 2, and this is a floating single crochet. Alright, so let's continue working our way around that first knot. What we need to do now is put in 4 more single crochets, again working through the floating ring. So we've got the equivalent of 5 single crochets, and we've reached the breakaway point for this knot. Now let's bring this back in because I'd like us to get our bearings. So I'm trying to overlay what we're working on with a square that's already been worked, just to help us keep track, or kind of mark where we are within the square. So we've done the first 5 of this knot. Now we need to skip over to this heart. We're going to start it with a floating treble, which is a stitch that'll sit connecting this little knot with this center ring. And then we work kind of this first side, kind of aiming down towards the point of this heart. So let's break that down. start with a floating treble. In this case, to do a floating treble, we've got some yarn overs. So do 2 yarn overs, and now make the floating ring, which is another yarn over, pinch, yarn over, pinch, yarn over, pull through 2. There's our floating ring. Finish the treble by pulling through all the loops on the hook. So pulling through 2 3 times. And there's our floating treble, the first stitch of our heart. Alright, now let's continue on down towards the pointy bit of the heart with 3 double crochets. And now we've come to another point where we're breaking away to something else. So here we are in relation to a finished heart. We've come to the point of this heart, and now we need to jump down and work this little central knot here. Again, that starts with a floating single crochet, and we're going to actually work it all the way around. So that means putting 7 more single crochets into its floating ring to make 8 single crochets altogether. So let's do that now. Start with our floating single crochet and 7 single crochets into the floating ring. And to close off this tiny little motif, what we do is put a slip stitch between it and our partial heart that we started. So we go in that kind of this crevice here and work a slip stitch around that point, and that has closed off the center little knot. Now let's work back up the other side of this heart with a treble, three double crochets, and a treble. And that's as far as we're going on our first heart, because now it's time to veer off and do a corner knot here. So here's where we are. We're going to now work just 2 stitches of this little knot, and then we'll continue on this heart. But for now, let's just work that little corner knot. So start with our floating single crochet, single crochet, and that's as far as we're going. Okay. Time for the next heart. Again, that starts with a floating treble, 3 double crochets, and then it's time to join it in to our central knot. So let's have a look at how to do that. Again, start with our floating treble. Three double crochets, and let's look at this join. So again, we're going to we're working our way towards the tip of this heart, which needs to be joined to the center knot. We know which stitch to go into by counting back to the second stitch of the central knot. The pattern instructions say to count back 13 stitches from behind the hook, or skip those. And that when I say those 13 stitches behind the hook, that's what I mean. These ones going backwards where we've just worked those ones. But really, you can just pretty much suss that out just skip the first stitch and slip stitch into the second one. Oops. And we do my kind of backward slip stitch by just dipping the hook back, shifting everything to the left of the hook, and bringing everything through. Let's continue this heart now with a treble, 3 double crochets, and a treble. And when I say finish, I mean we've just gone to the breakaway point. And there we are, working our way around this granny square. So the sequence we've just done here, where we've done a corner knot and a partial heart, that gets repeated for these 2 motifs here and this final corner knot here. So what we need to do now is just do a floating single crochet to start this knot, start this heart, connect it to the central knot and work back up the other side, start this corner knot with a floating single crochet, just start this heart with the floating treble, 3 double crochet, join it in and work back up to just after the 3rd double crochet here. Here we are. We've done the beginning of the 4th heart and I've stopped after the 3rd double crochet because now it's time to join up to our very first knot here. So we've got to connect those 2 together. So that's just a matter of, again, looking behind the hook, skipping the first single crochet and slip stitching into that next one. And there we are, all connected up. Now, the next thing to do is to come back the other way, and we're going to finish off all the hearts and knots. So we need to do the 2 bumps of each heart and the rest of the stitches for each knot until we get right back to the beginning. So on our current heart, it starts off slightly differently. I need to do 4 trebles into this center ring. Let's continue with this bump by doing a double crochet, chain 1, slip stitch, and there's our first bump done. Let's do the second bump now with chain 1, double crochet, and now we only need 3 trebles to finish this bump off. Now we need to close this heart up by, again, slip stitching between the heart and the next knot. Just go in those kind of little connecting threads there, do a slip stitch around those, and that's finished that heart up. Continue with the next knot. We need to do 6 more single crochets. And again, close it off with a slip stitch between it and the next heart. Now, here's the sequence for the rest of the square. This time, to work the first bump, we only need 3 trebles, double crochet, chain 1, slip stitch, chain 1, double crochet, 3 treble. close it off, a slip stitch between, and again 6 single crochets into the corner knot, and slip stitch. So that is the sequence. I won't bore you with doing the rest of that, but just 2 more hearts to finish. The 2 bumps here, 6 single crochets here, bump, bump, and then when you get to the very last knot, because we already we started off with 5 single crochets into it, we only need to do 3, because all knots only require 8 single crochets. Since it already has the 5, we only need 3 more. So I'll go ahead and get that done. And there is section 1 all finished up. Our Heartstrings Granny Square is finished. So now to start the second section, we've got kind of a little transition where we need to kind of add a kind of a mini border around our little Heartstrings Granny Square, just to square it off and to give a basis for the double crochets that will come after. And it's really pretty basic, starting with 5 chains. The first 3 are a double crochet and 2 chains. And then we come along to our first heart, and we need to slip stitch into this bump here, and I'd like you to do that with a back post slip stitch. So to find the stitch, we're going to go into, skip the first 2, and find the 3rd one there. To do the back post slip stitch, come from behind, cross over the front of that stitch and out the back, and finish that slip stitch there. And what that does is it kind of puts this sort of border behind the heart and makes the heart pop out a little bit more, just makes it more prominent. Continue with chain 3. And let's put a slip stitch into the bump of the second heart. You're just going to skip 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stitches, and again it's a back post slip stitch around that stitch. Continue with chain 2, and now we're going to connect up the corner knot with a double crochet. And we just do that. We kind of split the difference. Find the top of that knot and go in there with just a normal double crochet. Now here we are in the corner. Do chain 5. Double crochet in the same stitch as the previous one. Chain 2, and we do our slip stitches into the heart. There's the first one, chain 3, back post slip stitch there, that's hard to say, chain 2, double crochet into the knot, chain 5, another crochet into that same place, and so on. So just work your way around in that sequence. If you forget what to do, again, it's all in the pattern. So I'll work around and something slightly different when we go to end it in the last corner. So I've worked my way to the very beginning or end of the round, whichever way you're looking, and we're going to need another double crochet in this knot here where we started, and try to kind of aim where that chain 5 is sort of coming out of. And that's where we are. And now to finish, instead of doing chain 5 in the corner, finish off with chain 2 and a treble into the third chain of that starting chain. 1, 2, 3. And what that does is it brings us right to the corner of the corner, which sets us up nicely for the next round. So by doing that, we don't have to break the yarn or anything. We can just keep going with the same piece of yarn. So again, we're ready for this second section here, and since it's pretty much just a basic double crochet like you would for a solid granny square, I'm not going to demonstrate that in this video. I would assume if you're able to make this center granny or heartstrings granny square, you should be able to work something as simple as this double crochet section. So I'll go ahead and get that out of the way, and we'll move on from there. So I just want to reiterate, when you get to the very end of the 5th round, we end it with a double crochet into the 3rd stitch of that beginning chain 3, which counts as a chain 2 space, and that also gets us lined up just where we need to be to start our first heart on the first foundation row of the border. So it's very important that your hook is sitting right there, pretty much above that first stitch of that round. Okay, let's start with the first heart of the first foundation row. Since it's kind of transitioning between the main piece and the border, just this one heart here has very special instructions, and then from then on everything becomes pretty regular. So just wanted to make sure we understand how to do this first little heart. And we started off with a floating treble. We move to a double crochet, chain stitch, slip stitch into the floating ring, chain 1, double crochet. So we've kind of started the first bump and moved on to the beginning of the second bump, and now it's time to join this second bump up to our main piece. So again, this is the only time this join is going to look like this. But to do it, we need to count over 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches and do a slip stitch into that 5th double crochet. And then continue with the rest of the bump of this heart by putting in 3 trebles. There you go. So it's kind of it's not quite maybe a 3/4 heart, I don't know. But anyway, that's our special case. Now let's move on now. Put in a knot next door. Again, that starts with a floating single crochet. Then work 1 single crochet. And now it's time to join this knot to the main piece. Now to do that, skip 2 and join into that 3rd one. And now 2 more single crochets into this knot. And that's now the breakaway point to start the next heart that will sit right next door here. And from now on, all the hearts and knots on the edge will look or be made just like I'm going to do here. All right, so again, that knot will be the same on all edges. So this will start with a floating treble, Work 2 more trebles. Now we're going to join this bump to the main piece again. This time we skip, after a knot, we skip 2 stitches, 1, 2, and go into that 3rd stitch there to join up. Let's finish this bump with a double crochet, chain 1, slip stitch, start the next bump with the chain stitch, double crochet, and after this double crochet, again, that's a joining point. And this time, when we're in between bumps, we skip 3 stitches on the main piece. 1, 2, 3, go into the 4th. Finish the bump with 3 treble stitches. There we go. And so that's pretty much the sequence. You will have 2 more hearts to do here with knots in between. I'll just go ahead and finish this edge and meet you at the corner. There we are. And you'll know you've done things right because this second join on the last heart will go into the last stitch of this side. Okay, so now that that edge or side is done, we've got a little knot that belongs in the corner here that's not joined to the main piece. So that's very much like we've done for the center granny square with just a floating single crochet, and now we're ready to turn the corner and go back down this edge using the same sequence here, and making sure when you do your first join it goes into the first stitch of this side and working along there. So that's your sequence all the way around. And just to review kind of how you're skipping things after, just ignore that for now. For the rest of the piece, you've got 2 stitches you're skipping here and here on either side of the knot, and then you've got 3 stitches between the bumps of the hearts. So that's your skip sequence, so to speak. So here I am at the end of the 4th side on our foundation row. I've done the last heart. Remember, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 hearts. And one important step before we move on is I'd like you to put a stitch marker actually around the post of this last stitch. That will be very important later on when we join the edges. Don't forget that. Now for the second return row, we're going to switch gears and start working our way around the other way around the square. And the point of this round is, or row I should say, is to finish off the hearts and the knots. That means for each heart we're going to add the pointy bit and just the other half of each knot. And that is just going to be the same sequence for every heart and knot along just the edge. Something happens differently in the corner, but we'll get there in a minute. But for now, to add the pointy bit onto each heart, start with a treble, three double crochets, chain one. See, these tips are going to be different from from the middle square. We're going to do that slightly different. That means each tip will have a chain one, a treble two together, the tip, chain one, three double crochets, and a treble and we close this heart off with a slip stitch between it and the next knot. And that's that finished. Continue to the next knot. We need 4 single crochets to make up the 8. So that's 4 single crochets and again a slip stitch to close it off between it and the next heart. So there, that is the sequence. Just continue that for each heart and knot until you get to the corner. There we are, and now that we have reached the corner, we've got a little our corner knot there. It's different. You just need to work 6 single crochets into it instead of the 4, and slip stitch in between, and carry on with the next edge in the same sequence as over here, and just work your way all the way back around to the beginning of the row. Now, to end this first foundation row, in other words, we've gone all the way around, we've finished off all the pointy bits of every heart, and we finished off all the knots. Here we are at the last knot of the last heart of the row. We've ended with that treble stitch there. So in other words, we've done the treble 2 together at the point, chain 1, 3 double crochets, and just that last treble. That's where we're breaking away. But before we go to the next row, we're going to go ahead and start a brand new knot in this corner. It's just going to be a partial knot. Of course, that starts with a floating single crochet, 1 more single crochet, and now we'll be able to jump up to the next second foundation row. Okay, for the second foundation row, we put a heart just above this partial knot we've started here, and because it's the sort of the transition between the 2 rows, this first heart is going to have special instructions. The rest will be pretty regular. So just to make sure we're all on the same page, the very first heart of the second foundation row starts with a treble 2 together, a floating one I should say, which starts just like a normal floating treble with 2 yarn overs. Make the floating ring, pull through 2, pull through 2, but leave those last 2 because this is a 2 stitch together kind of deal. Continue with 2 yarn overs straight into the floating ring, pull through 2, pull through 2, and finish that floating treble 2 together with a pull through 3. So that's the tip of the first heart of this second foundation row. Now let's work up the right hand side with a chain, 3 double crochets, and a treble, and that's as far as we're going on this very first heart of this row. I'll try to lay that out. There we go. So now let's look at the edge sequence. What I mean is just working along each edge. That will be the same on each edge from now on, and it starts with a knot, and just do that first floating single crochet, another single crochet, and now we've come to the point where we need to join, and this time we're going to join into the tip of the heart that's just underneath. Just join that up with a slip stitch, and then 2 more single crochets, go. And now we've got our next heart. Again, it's going to be right side up, so the sequence will be slightly different. However, we still do start with a floating treble. Let's work our way down to the tip with 3 double crochets. Again, this is very similar to how we work the hearts in the middle here, so this should be familiar. And we've worked our way down to the tip, and we're working the tip slightly differently though, with a chain stitch. And now we need to join this heart into the knot below. So just look for that next knot, go into the second stitch, slip stitch, and now we've got a treble 2 together. Goes right in the tip of the heart. Chain 1, and working our way back up at the other side, we've got 3 double crochets and a treble. So that is the basic sequence. We just got another knot, heart, so to speak. Work just like we've just done these two here. So that's got things established on the edge, and now we're ready for the corner. We need to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hearts started on this row, and this next heart kind of slots in to the corner here. So just start that as usual with a floating treble. Three double crochets, chain 1, and I guess it's really more pointing out how to join this one. Again, we're looking for kind of that second stitch in the knot below. Chain 1, treble 2 together, 3 double crochet, and finally the treble. And now we're ready to do a little knot that will sit right in the corner. And it's going to be very similar to the central granny square, where we just need a floating single crochet and one more single crochet. That's as far as we're going on that corner knot. And now start the first heart of the next row, which will veer out this way. So if we turn around here, just start another heart, and again we're joining now into, when we get to the tip, just joining into that second stitch there and carrying on across the row. And now on the last edge we need, of course, 5 hearts started on this edge. The thing is, this last heart, I've gone ahead and worked it, but it doesn't join up to anything. It's our hanging heart, so to speak. So just work it as usual, but without joining the tip to anything. And now after this hanging heart, I'd like you to do one more knot. This knot will go all the way around with all 8 stitches, and we're also going to place a marker in one of the stitches that will help us join things up later on. So floating single crochet, work 2 single crochets, and mark that last stitch, that one there, and then the remaining 5 single crochets, and slip stitch in between, and that gets us ready now for the second return row. Now for the second return row, we are again finishing off the hearts all the way around on all four edges. And it is pretty much like we did on the central Heartstrings Granny Square. We finish off the bumps and then do a knot. Only this time we've got more hearts and knots in a row. So the sequence is slightly different, but really not that much different. So continue with the second return row. With our first heart, we've got our first bump with 3 trebles, double crochet, chain, and slip stitch. That makes our first bump. Chain, double crochet, and 3 trebles to work the second bump. Again, close it off, and this one is our hanging heart, so that's going to be slightly different, but the stitches are the same for all of these hearts along this row. Okay, so close it off again with our slip stitch between, and on these edge knots we already have 4 single crochets. We need 4 more, so do 4 single crochets into these little edge knots, slip stitch between, and that's the sequence for the edge. Let's finish off all our bumps and knots along this edge. And now that I've finished pretty much that edge and reached the corner, we've got our little corner knot here. Again, it's just like we did on the central Heartstrings Granny Square. We just need 6 single crochets around there and a slip stitch. Slip stitch between, and continue finishing off the hearts and knots for the next side. So here we are at the very end of the second foundation row. We've come to the last heart of the row, and this is where we now need to not only finish these unfinished motifs, but we also need to join them to the other edge here. All right, so just as a sort of a road map here, we need to finish the 2 hearts of the 2 bumps, sorry, of this heart and join into that marked stitch. Once the bumps are done, we continue down to the point of this heart and do a slip stitch. Work 2 single crochets into this unfinished knot and join it into the tip of this heart. Come back to this little knot, work 2 more single crochets, join it into this marked stitch, 2 more single crochets, slip stitch between, and now we finish the remaining part of the bump of this heart with just 2 more trebles into that floating ring, and then slip stitch and finish off. So let's, if you really need to see that demonstrated, let's do that now. So here we go. We've got our first bump we need to make on this heart. So we've got 3 trebles, double crochet, chain 1, slip stitch, chain 1, double crochet, and the 3 treble stitches. Now here's where we need to join this heart into the marked stitch here. So just do a slip stitch into that marked stitch. Let's join those up. Now let's work a little bit more on this heart. Remember, we've got to work our way back down to the pointy bit. of the heart. So continue with another treble. Three double crochets. Chain one and slip stitch between the heart and the next knot to finish off that heart. So that's that first heart joined up. Let's have a look. Join to that knot. Now let's continue around our knot. Work two more single crochets. And find our hanging heart here. Find the tip. Do a slip stitch into that tip. Let's join that up. Two more single crochets in our current knot. And slip stitch into our marked stitch here. Come back to our knot. We've got two more single crochets into it. And we always have 8 single crochets in a knot. Finish it off with a slip stitch between it and the next heart. I don't know, we're all turned around here, but I think you can understand what's going on, I hope. Okay, and now, here we go. We've just finished this knot, and now we can see how it leads off to this next heart. We just need to do 2 trebles into it. Okay, that's that heart done. And except for closing it off, just do a slip stitch. Or just do a slip stitch around that next little part here where it joined up, and finish off the yarn. It's us finished. Okay. So I hope you enjoyed this project. If there's anything you need clarifying, please let me know. I'd also love to see anything that you happen to make. So thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.